Sometimes I get very lucky with design topics just falling into my lap. And for today's video, we're going to discuss some thoughts Jonathan Blow had about the independent scene. And while a lot of people are focusing on the first thing he said, not a lot are focusing on what I think is the more important quote. Recently, Jonathan Blow gave an interview at the Casual Connect Summit, where he was asked about the state of independent developers and the independent scene. And for those of you who don't know, Jonathan Blow is the creator of Braid, one of the major games that took off during the Xbox Summer of Games event back in the end of the last decade. And he has risen to fame/infamy, depending on who you talk to, thanks to his thoughts on game design, politics, and programming. And he certainly earned a lot more ire from people with this interview. For the first part of it, he talked about how he felt that independent games were kind of chasing AAA developers and that he wasn't seeing anything original or unique from it. And a lot of people have latched onto that part of the interview. And I do not agree with that, especially with all the independent games we've played. But the part that I think a lot of people are missing, and that's very important to understand, is a quote that he gave at the end of the article, which should be going up somewhere right there and will be up for the rest of this first part. And I'll include a link to the full interview down below. But he talked about how he felt that developers were not doing a good job of designing games that are playable or that are appealing to other people. And this gets at a major topic that we've spoken about before, and it's one that I feel a lot of first-time developers tend to either ignore or don't understand. And that is that playability is king when it comes to game design. Now, when we talk about playability, we're referring to the ways in which a game can be made easy to understand or people can figure out how to play your game. There's essentially not a lot of barriers in terms of somebody being able to figure out the game. Now, barriers from the outside, that's when we get into accessibility concerns. And that is a whole nother topic. But on the quote that's up there, he's talking about how he wishes that games were, people were making something that was interesting to people. And there's a lot of different ways you can spin that. How I want to talk about is that we've played many games from developers that, to be frank, just aren't that appealing outside of their own niche audience. In some cases, this can be the fact that the developer didn't understand playability and UI issues. Sometimes they understand it, but willingly choose to ignore it in favor of designing something unique. And another part of the interview that Jonathan Blow kind of got some flack for was something about how a lot of developers these days are just banking on that unique idea and nothing else. I'm going to make this emotionally driven game about childhood. Well, I'm sure there are other games like it out there. I'm going to make this very rich story about World War II. Well, I'm sure there's other games out there about that as well. But the point that he was trying to allude to is that in today's market, uniqueness doesn't sell as well as it did 10 to 15 years ago. When developers like Jonathan Blow, Emmett McMillan, Phil Fish, around the end of the last decade, they got very big with their titles because nobody was seeing games like that from the independent space. We fast forward to today, and that is a far different story. Again, close your eyes, put your finger on the Steam new release page, you're going to hit a game from an independent developer, some random title. Again, there are a good 30 to 50 games being released daily. Not weekly, not monthly, but daily. And with all those titles coming out, it is very important for your game to have the best foot forward, or you're not going to be able to stand that well in this market. And when we look at a lot of the independent games, again, for the games that we spotlight here on the channel and on Game Wisdom, that is only a fraction of the games being released daily. And there are plenty of games that I've sadly gotten keys for that I have not made videos for because it just really wasn't worth anybody's time. And this is when we talk about the issues of quality and playability, or quality of life and playability. That if I'm playing your take on, let's say, a 2D platformer, and your game is actually worse to play than something from 1995 or even 1989, why should I look at your title? And it's a very tough pill to swallow. A lot of developers, again, do not think about things in terms of playability. They think about them in terms of the vision or the art. And the artist's dilemma is a very real issue, and chances are I'm going to have a video on that topic going up in a few days. But again, when it comes to making a game that's interesting for other people to play, it creates a very weird disconnect between the critical and the commercial reception of a game. And we have seen this plenty of times over in the independent space, where a game will do really well or will be criticized or critiqued very positively among developers or small Facebook groups, to then just flop outright when it gets to the market. Some examples would be Sky Shine's Bedlam, Where the Water Tastes Like Wine, and I'm sure there are a few other ones that come to my mind. But the point with these games, I just remember the other one, Brigador. But the point is that these titles are released, they have a very favorable reception among their own communities and fan bases, and then the developers kind of left scratching their head as to why aren't more people buying this game? And the sad part is that when we talk about playability issues, this is stuff that is design 101. And like I've said in previous pieces, I am getting more and more critical of games that fail playability tests. And like we've said before, playability is not where you want a thing outside the box. If your game is hard to play or just doesn't really look all that appealing, nobody's going to really give that game the time of day outside of the most hardened fan bases. But again, if you're designing a game that's only going to appeal to 30 or 40 people, or 3% of the market, how are you going to make a living off of that game? Now, another part from that interview that a lot of people have been critiquing Jonathan Blow about is again the issue of not having quality original games. And many developers took to Twitter to talk about the games that are on itch.io. But unfortunately, from what we've seen, it is a very hard sell to put itch.io as kind of the banner for high quality indie games. And for those of you watching this, some of you probably are nodding your head in agreement, and a few of you are probably getting ready to write me a nasty comment down below. But we're going to take a quick Patreon and sponsor shout break, and when we return, we're going to take a little tour of itch.io and just see where that sentiment comes from. And now for a quick thank you to our Patreon supporters and current Game Wisdom sponsors. If you would like to continue this discussion on game design, be sure to check out our Discord channel, link down below. Welcome my friends to itch.io. For some of you watching this right now, this will probably be your first time looking at this. For our regulars for our weekly live show, this should look all too familiar for you. But a lot of people were criticizing Jonathan Blow and citing that itch.io is a place for high quality, unique, original indie games. And while we can certainly say original, again, when we talk about playability or making a game appealing, that, my friends, could be up for debate. Now, what you're looking at is the most popular tag on itch right now. And again, depending upon when you're actually going onto the site, what you see may be different from me. But we're going to just scroll down here. And one thing is that you'll notice that a lot of the games on itch can also be Game Jam titles. And there's no distinction between the two. But I want you all to just take note of some of the thumbnail arts that you're seeing for these games, as well as the price that gets attached to them. Now, some of these do look really good. I was actually taken back by the quality of this one when I was looking at this the other day. Now, as we keep going down, though, you're going to see a very wide spectrum in terms of the quality and just what some of these thumbnail arts are. Oh, and also, if we could have a little drinking game as to how many thumbnail arts may get me into trouble on YouTube when this video goes up. But as I'm scrolling through here, again, there is certainly a lot of variety among these games, and plenty of the games on itch.io come from student and first-time developers. Now here's one. This is the Kickstarter that we actually looked at on the channel a few weeks ago. But again though, as we're scrolling through, there's just a lot of games that it's very hard to consider giving them a second look or even a first look, depending upon your own thoughts. There is one that showed up earlier that I'm pretty sure will get me flagged. I'm curious if it will pop up when I'm doing this video. But when it comes to playability, and for a lot of these games, it can be very hard to convince someone to play your title. And again, game design is as much an art as it is a science. And just because you have a unique idea, that doesn't mean you have an idea that people want to play. And for some of these titles I'm seeing on itch, here's one right there, it's very hard to convince someone that there is quality here. And like I said, as we're scrolling down, there's a few of these games that I'm actually looking at that look very interesting. Hot Dog Dreamer, I'm not so sure about that one. But the point is, when it comes to making a video game, especially for first-time developers, playability is a major element that a lot of people don't think about. This was one that I was looking at earlier that looked kind of interesting. And if any developers are watching this, remember, we do an indie game spotlight where I take a look at games. But for a lot of the games that we've spotlit, again, we're noticing general playability concerns. The UI is very hard to understand. The mechanics aren't really explained all that well. And again, when we talk about these issues, this is where uniqueness kind of falls away. Because as you can see, as I'm scrolling down this list, I am sure you guys are noticing there are a lot of unique games on itch. Oh, and there is the one that I'm pretty sure will get me a copyright, or I'm sorry, a flag or warning if YouTube pays more attention to this video. But when it comes to releasing these games or putting them out there, you have to understand what it means to make something that is playable. Because putting your own crazy, weird idea up there, and that's it, is not going to make your game appealing or make you understand why certain people are going to play your game or not. And there are lots of independent developers out there who will not listen to criticism, whether it is constructive or if it's just outright, hyperbolic. And while, no one's saying that you should listen to people yelling and screaming at you, you have to take feedback into account. And there are plenty of social groups for developers who people will post footage and content about their games, and nobody will say anything bad about it on the grounds of not willing to offend or hurt their feelings. But the problem is that it's very easy to take the wrong lessons when it comes to releasing your game. And we unfortunately have seen this among independent developers. And this is ultimately the major point about playability. That playability is not something you can readily see or is made apparent unless you know what you're looking for. And for a lot of the games I'm scrolling down through on itch, there are probably some really good games on here. But a lot of it, again, how many of you would buy these games or download them on the thumbnail or description alone? Again, I'm asking you. For those of you watching this right now, let me know in the comments below. But the point is that for a lot of these games that just don't have a good look to them or are trying to copy what somebody else did, you're not really understanding why these games succeeded in the first place. Again, there are games on here and on Steam that are basically, I played Darkest Dungeon, it succeeded because it's a creepy-ass atmospheric RPG, I'm going to make that and be the next Darkest Dungeon. Or I'm going to make a brutally difficult roguelike and I will be the next FTL. Or the next Spelunky. Or pick any major title. But if you're not understanding why those games worked in the first place, you are not going to succeed. Or, again, you're going to take the wrong lessons. 5 people saying your game is perfect, it's great, and that's all they're going to say, is not really good feedback. And I know this is a very bitter pill. Wow, that's perfect right here. Somebody decided to make FTL, but with multiplayer. But again, if you're making a game and you're trying to appeal to something that was already successful, I'm afraid I may be coughing in a second, without understanding why those games worked, you are just not going to succeed in this market. And this goes back to the point that, from the John LeBlow quote from the first part, that if all you're thinking about is uniqueness and nothing else, then you're going to fall into this trap of making a game and not figuring out why people are playing this genre or this design in the first place. Or if you're just focusing so much on uniqueness that you don't care about that, then you're going to be fighting an uphill battle to get people to convince them to play your game. And like I said a few seconds ago, as we're scrolling down, some of these games do look really great. Some of them look very weird. But again, if all you're doing is copying somebody else's design or not caring about why people are playing these games, then the chance of you being able to succeed and ideally be able to make a living off of your games just goes down and down and down. Don't bite me, bro. And in a sense, we're kind of doing our own weird game segment from our live show right now in this video. But again, to begin to wrap things up, nobody is saying that you can't make unique games. And again, despite what John LeBlow said, there is certainly a lot of creativity among the independent space. But you need to temper that with playability. And 1 second. Sorry about that, I kind of lost my voice for a few minutes. But as we were saying, playability has to be on your mind whenever you're thinking about designing a game, even if it is an experimental, weird title that you're not really thinking about selling it, outright as a mass market product. But the earlier that you think about playability, it's going to help your game design. And like I was saying a few minutes ago, playability is not something that a lot of people think about. It's not something that most consumers will consider when they're playing your game. They'll only consider playability by saying your game sucks or if there are any problems with it. And unless you have an eye towards game design, you're going to suffer those issues. And like we were saying earlier, it's pretty much a case of what you don't know will hurt you. And uniqueness is not the same as making a game that's playable. And again, this is what a lot of developers got away with over this past decade. When nobody else is making a video game, more and more people are willing to let aside or put aside accessibility and playability concerns if you're the only game in town. But that's not how things work today, and it's not going to be how things work in the coming years as well. Again, as game design and game engines or game programming becomes more standardized and easier to get into, more and more people are going to be making games. And again, as we've been scrolling down on itch here, like we said, there are a lot of games on here that I'm sure nobody watching this would give them the time of day, and there are probably a few of these that you're actually going to be interested in playing. But the problem is, look at how much we've had to scroll down and in between to get to those games. Look, here's Baba Is You, one of the more critically and commercially well-received puzzle games of this year. But again, look at how much we've had to go through to find these quality games. And again, some of the games that we've been scrolling down that we are not giving a second chance to, they could be really great ideas. But again, the point remains, how many of these games that are great ideas are also going to be playable and enjoyable to experience? And again, I don't have the answer to that. Someone's making a remake of Mario Odyssey. I mean, I am really going to get... YouTube is coming down on me for this one for sure. But to begin to wrap things up for this piece, while I don't agree with Jonathan Blow saying that indie games aren't creative or unique, because we have certainly shown that off, making a game that can be accessible or enjoyable by others is another story. And it takes a lot of work to make your game playable. And uniqueness does not sell as well as it did 5 to 10 years ago. And just because you have a unique idea, that does not mean that you can charge somebody money for it. And it takes a very keen eye towards game design, and also means that you have to take criticism as well if you want your game to be enjoyable for other people. Because again, you can certainly design a game for you and your 10 friends, or for your niche group of people that you're friendly with on Facebook. But that is not the same as designing a game that, hundreds of people, or ideally thousands of people, are going to enjoy. And if you don't understand why people aren't playing your game, whether it's from a playability concern, UI, or even just a content point of view, then you are not going to learn what it means to make a successful game. And it's very easy for you to take the wrong lessons if all you do is listen to nothing but positive feedback or no feedback at all. And I know a few of you right now, when I say that phrase or say that term, you're probably chuckling to yourself thinking that I'm just making that up. But no, that is not the case. We have seen developers over the years who will ignore feedback along all lines, or saying everybody's favorite line, it's the consumer who doesn't understand my game. And if that's your mentality going into game development, then you are just not going to succeed. But I think I've pissed off enough people for today, especially, having a Jonathan Blow quote here on the video. But thank you so much for watching today's piece. Be sure to come back for daily discussions on game design here, and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. And if you want to see more weird or unique games, tune into our live show every Sunday around 3:30, 4 p.m. EST. But until next time, have a great day. If you're looking for a book on design, my first title, 20 Essential Games to Study, is out now. It is available where most books are sold, and it comes in paper, hardcover, or digital copies. This is the perfect book for anyone interested in learning about game design, whether you are a student, enthusiast, or just a fan. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoy things, be sure to do all the liking and subscribing that the kids are doing these days. Check out our Discord channel link down below, where we hang out and chat game design, and come back later tonight for our regular streamings. But that's it, and tune in for more great content here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games.